My struggles were always from the inside. I mean, I was in denial for a really, really long time. I had been struggling a lot with moderating my drinking. I was very much a binge drinker, party boy. But once I started, I had a really hard time stopping. And once I got introduced to cocaine, that really accelerated things for me. And I found another therapist. He looked at me directly in the eyes the way no one has ever looked at me. And he said, "Luke, you cannot be drinking again." I thought being sober meant you were weak. I was like, there's no way that I'm going to be able to do this.
All right, that was tonight's guest, Luke Zoratto. I'm Daniel Unmanageable, and this is Hard Knox Talks, coming at you from Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Treaty Number 6 territory, and the traditional homeland of the Métis people. Let's bring in Luke. What's up, Luke?
Hey, Dan.
How are you doing tonight?
You? Great intro. Great intro.
Thank you so much. That's high praise. I appreciate that. I'm trusted every week with a piece of somebody's story, and I do my best to. And I was saying to Donnie, you know, even if I say so myself, I picked some damn good music for that one.
He did toot his own horn. Yep.
I did. I really did.
Yeah. He deserves to, though. I agree with him 100%.
Oh, that's nice. So, Luke, is there anything that you would like to say before we jump in tonight?
Yeah, just thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. You have quite the audience. You've built quite the audience. Obviously, it's I think we were talking before we went live. You've been doing this for a couple of years, so it's just a real pleasure to be here with you and to give me an opportunity to share and hopefully help or resonate with somebody and give maybe a bit of hope. So that's what it's all about.
All right, man. Well, we're glad you're here. And having said that, let's go.
This is Hard Knox Talks.
All right, before we dive in tonight, I just want to let our viewers and listeners know that tonight's live production is sponsored in part by the Elizabeth Fry Society of Saskatchewan, helping women before, during, and after incarceration, prairie harm reduction, emphasizing local action with national impact, and Stronger Together Canada, peer-led support groups by Moms Stop the Harm. To learn more about all our sponsors, visit www.hardknoxtalks.com. So, Luke, in your intro, you talked a little bit about binge drinking, about being the party boy, about finding cocaine, about all of these things. Those are sort of things that happened as you progressed along your journey. But before we get to those things, why don't we take a few minutes and go back? And why don't you tell us a little bit about what it was like growing up? Was there a lot of alcohol at home?
There was, absolutely. There was, I guess a good way to kind of touch on that a little bit was just, I guess, talk about, so I'm from Toronto, grew up in Toronto, but my background specifically, I'm half Italian. My father's from Italy and, his family as well. And on my mom's side, they're French Canadian. So both cultures, Italian and French, they love, socializing, with alcohol. They love having a great time. They love cooking good meals, having company over. So that's very much how I grew up. My family was very social. My parents were very social. They had a lot of friends. So, growing up, it was used to having a lot of people at the house and, celebrating or having dinner, that kind of stuff. And my nonno, my Italian grandfather, he actually used to make wine in the basement at his house. So whenever we'd go there, he'd have his his homemade wine, and he used to mix it with ginger ale. So you'd have like half wine, half ginger ale, but he would drink pretty much all day. Like that was his thing. He always had a glass of wine in his hand, half and half, ginger ale and wine. So I grew up actually really young, having what we called Nono's Coke. Nono's Coke was ginger ale and a little bit of wine. So I had that growing up, and that was always, with the family and stuff like that. So it's very, controlled. So, my drinking, I guess, my drinking career, as I call it, I had different stages, different phases of my drinking. I mean, I think at first, like everyone who's younger in their teens, it was more about kind of fitting in high school, parties, stuff like that. I mean, it was just, the occasional blackout, heavy drinking, nothing crazy. Mm-hmm. And then I think in university,
well, hang on a minute. before we get too far
Yeah,
ahead
sorry.
here, what? No,
Getting
it's
excited.
no, it's cool. And now we're here today.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, what was it like? So, were you like seeking out that drink from Nono? Were you like trying like did you look forward
N
to
n
it?
no, no, I definitely, I mean, to be honest with you, I didn't even really like it. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't even really like it. It
Mm-hmm.
tasted kinda weird.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, you're young. It's like, you know, you're doing something different, and I knew that, you know, maybe not a lot of my friends were doing this with their family, so it felt kinda cool, like, you know,
Mm-hmm.
drinking wine with my family. It's pretty cool when you're young, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
So, what was it like the first time you got loaded? Then, like, what was the circumstances around it?
I don't actually remember the first time I got drunk, but
That
it
good,
would
hey?
probably have been like
Blacked out first time.
or it's that, or I just getting older, my memory's not as good.
Hmm.
But, it wasn't anything like, you know, crazy or anything like that, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Actually, a funny story that I could share with you. So I have 2 fake teeth, playing hockey, so I had like a flipper, like a retainer, or not a
Mm-hmm.
retainer, like a mouth thing. And I remember once when I was really young, not really young, I think I might have been like 15 or 16. My parents had some friends over, and actually, our friend was my parents' friend was a dentist who was actually my dentist, and we had a gathering actually at my cousin's house, and they had a keg in the basement, and the kids hung out in the basement. So that was pretty dangerous, right? You got the keg right there in the basement. Just the kids are hanging out watching TV. The parents are upstairs, so easy to sneak and get beer. So I had a bunch of beers. I don't know how many I had, but I got pretty drunk and
Mm-hmm.
ended up puking. And what happened was I puked out my teeth, like my retainer, or like the with the teeth kind of built into it. It,
Mm-hmm.
it came out into the washroom, and I didn't even notice. I flushed the toilet, went
Oh
back
no.
upstairs, and I went up to where the parents were kind of having dinner or just hanging out, and I was kind of like, where are my teeth? Where? And that was it became like a family joke, like, where are my teeth? Because I couldn't say it properly because I had 2 teeth missing.
Yeah.
And my dentist was at the table, and he's like, I know exactly what happened. He puked, and his teeth came out because they come out fairly easily.
Yeah.
So that was kind of like I guess an interesting little thing. But yeah, it was like, 13, 14, 15, something like that. So yeah, puking is not cool, but I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
don't think that's totally at a a crazy thing to do at that age. So
Yeah. Yeah.
that would have been
So
probably my first few times.
So oftentimes when I'm hearing people's stories like this, they describe the first time they got loaded as like arriving home or feeling like they like got a warm fuzzy blanket or something like that, and that's what really sort of sparked them into seeking out more. And I'm not really getting that from you. Is that not been that wasn't your experience?
Yeah, it wasn't it wasn't, no, I wouldn't say it was like that. I'd say, I drank to at that, especially young, at the younger age, 'cause, like, to fit in, honestly, to fit
Mm,
in. Like, it was cool to drink, right?
mm-hmm,
My cousin's a couple years older, so I just wanted to, like, kind of be cool. I wanted to drink to be cool.
mm,
The reason why I drank later changed, because it gave me confidence. Liquid courage, like, that thing's real, right? So
mm-hmm,
that's like why I drank a lot more later, is I wanted to feel good. I wanted to feel confident.
mm-hmm. So you graduated high school, and you mentioned already you got into university. Where did things really start to take off for you as far as your drinking went?
So, high school would have been, I wouldn't say maybe every weekend, but maybe definitely every other weekend, parties, drinking a lot. But I felt like I was kind of fitting in with everyone, and I wasn't drinking more or wasn't drinking less than most people. I was call it, just kind of like a regular kid, right? University, I noticed that I had a hard time socializing without alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
What happened was in university, I started getting a bit more, like, a bit louder. I was a bit more, spontaneous with things, a bit more of a character. I was a bit of a character. And I
Mm-hmm.
liked, and that really came out when I drank. So I found that I had created like a character within my friends or circle of friends, where I was like this really outgoing, confident, like loud person. Like you'd see me, dancing on a table in a house party or making a speech impromptu at a party. Like I loved attention. I loved attention, especially when I was drinking. I was a really quiet, shy guy, pretty shy without alcohol. So I felt that when I had alcohol, I was just so much more fun. I tried really hard to make people laugh. I tried really hard to just be like that fun person. Really, really, I was just people pleasing. If you just really want to simplify that, I was really people pleasing in university. And again, it wasn't really, that bad per se. Again, it was, I still studied, still got my work done, but it was like the weekends or during the week, I had a hard time. Stopping. But when things got worse, when things got more challenging for me is when I finished school and I moved back home for a year. I lived with my parents for a year. Then after a year, I moved out with a girlfriend. We got our own little place. And then within 6 months, we broke up. So I had this call it university girlfriend. We were together for 3 years. Second year we met, and 3 years, came back home, lived with my parents for a year while we were both working full time. Then we got our place, and within 6 months we broke up.
So
once we broke up, that's when things got bad. That's when things accelerated.
I was just going to ask you, did you notice that when you were together, did you drink less?
I don't think I drank less. I drank quite a bit. She drank too. She loved to have fun. So we had a very social lifestyle. We went out, a lot. We had a lot of friends. So, it, again, like I said, it wasn't that, I didn't find that it was like that bad. It was definitely like not good, but it wasn't like something that I was overly concerned about. I was not concerned about that. In university, I was just kind of like, this is how it is. This is like a student work, you're studying, you're working and you're having fun. You're just having fun. So yeah.
So you mentioned cocaine. Tell us about how that came to be and what your thoughts were around it when you first started doing it.
Yeah. So that's when things accelerated and got more challenging for me. And I started putting myself in really, difficult situations, and I started making my life a lot more complicated than it needed to be. So after we broke up and, she moved out, it was a 2-bedroom place and I couldn't afford it on my own. So I ended up getting roommates. So I had to, I had a bunch of different roommates staying in the second bedroom. And it was kind of in that phase of my life where I was, working full time, no girlfriend, kind of, living with a roommate, kind of in the city, condo in the city. And that's when I started, drinking more. And then that's when I got introduced to cocaine through some friends. And, it became to a point where just like, a few beers or a couple of drinks would never be enough anymore. It's because once I got introduced to drugs, cocaine, it's like, that's what I wanted. That's what I wanted after I had a few drinks. And then when you're on that stuff, you're just really, you're not the same person. You're becoming someone else. You're doing a lot of things you normally wouldn't do. And it's just, that's when things kind of got a little bit scary actually. And that's when I knew that, okay, like something's going on here. I'm feeling really bad about myself a lot of the time. And that's when I started realizing that maybe there's something here.
Yeah. Let's take a break. Look at a few comments. Donna's furiously typing over here. Ready?
I was just commenting that we've got Star Wars happening.
Oh, good.
In a comment, which is deadly.
Yeah.
So thank you, Guy, for all that. Bear with me 1 second. Got to get over here. So first comment is from Peter Mahana. Says, I had my first drink at 15 years old and I puked too. I can relate. I was like drinking a little bit younger, but it wasn't until I was about 15 or so that I had my first like real drunk, and it
Yeah.
was horrible. I should have just stopped right then.
Yeah, mine too. I woke up the next morning and I was soaking wet and the bed was it was terrible, but that was like just fuel to my fire.
And Joshua Sanders says, I really love what y'all do for the recovery community. Thank you, Joshua. And Cindy Doolin, thank you for your comment, says drinking and smoking weed was normalized in my home when I was growing up.
Hmm. So you started the first time that you did cocaine, did it did you feel like, oh, this is wrong, or were you in a spot where you were just like, I'm just gonna do this because it looks amazing and it feels thrilling?
Yeah, I definitely knew that it was a bit more intense than drinking. Like
Mm-hmm.
I didn't feel great that I was kind of starting to use. But where I started quickly saying to myself was, hey, Luke, you work very hard.
Mm-hmm.
You work hard. You should play hard. Like you should play hard. So that's what I would say to myself. It's like, no, I know it's like drugs are kind of more hardcore, like not something you tell your parents kind of thing. But I was like, you know what, Luke, like you're working hard all week. You're gonna party. You're gonna party hard. And I was still showing up to work on Monday. Like I
Mm-hmm.
showed up to work. I never used drugs during the week, unless of course there was a big social event, something going on like a Thursday night. There'd be a chance I'd use drugs, and then Friday would be like kind of hit and miss. But for the most part, that's where I think I was wrong, is that I said I felt like I deserved it. Like I worked hard, so I wanted to play hard.
Mm-hmm. So when did it start to actually like? So you showed up to work. You were paying the bills. You were doing all the things, or did it start to
Yep.
go sideways and you started to slip? Like what happened? Like what was the thought process that brought you into recovery?
Yeah, so it was it would go, like if I would start on a Friday, there's been many weekends where I would go right till Sunday without any sleep.
Mm,
Without any sleep, go to a place, go to an after hours. I would shut down, go back to someone's place, party, and then go back out again like that. That was pretty common actually for a good chunk of for a few years. That was really common, and that's kind of what I did. And I knew then, like, because like I said, yeah, I showed up to work on Monday, but I'd have a lot of anxiety. I had a lot of anxiety. You haven't slept for a long time, and it wasn't like it was like that every weekend. It
mm-hmm,
wasn't like that every single weekend, but there was a good chance that it could come up. And it's just I started, becoming inconsistent. Right, I was just really inconsistent with things in my life. Committing to things and bailing last minute. Just a lot of stuff like that. And that's when I knew that, that it just wasn't sustainable. Like if I wanted to keep my corporate job and I wanted to, continue, that it would eventually catch up to me. So I became a bit more self-aware that I needed to get help and seek out help and try to get, because like I said, my lows were very low.
mm-hmm,
So that's when I kind of reached out at first, to get some help.
mm-hmm.
So that's when it kind of started.
And what did that look like? I know you mentioned a little bit in the intro there. You reached out to a therapist. But what was that relationship like? I mean, you mentioned that he pegged you right away, but did that relationship continue? Did you seek peer support? Like, what did that look like?
Yeah. So the clip that you shared where I talked about the therapist, that was actually another therapist that I contacted way after this first journey with this other
Oh, okay,
therapist.
okay.
So I had been working with someone for a while where
Mm-hmm.
we were trying to moderate my drinking and just trying to like kind of touch in on, maybe why I was drinking so much, or like trying to get into like the deeper stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of it was moderating, right? This whole sober thing was never something I would have ever entertained. There's no way. I was like, I'm half Italian, I'm French Canadian. This is my culture. This is how I was raised. Like, there's no way I'm going to stop drinking. Yeah, the drugs definitely need to stop. But socially, like I still want to fit in, I still want to fit in.
Mm-hmm.
I had created such an identity around being this fun, outgoing person. I was like, there's no way I'm going to lose that. There's no way I'm going to lose that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what we did for a while. We worked on moderating, and, a lot of things that she was helping me with were pretty common things, like, check in with yourself, write down how you're feeling, don't drink on an empty stomach, mix it in with what, like very like common sense things that worked a little bit, but a lot of the times they didn't work. And that was the scary part. It's like, I'm investing in myself. I'm trying to get better, and it was working a little bit, but it wasn't working a lot of the other times too. And I never knew which version of myself I would get when I would start drinking. Like I really didn't know.
It wasn't sustainable.
Yeah, exactly. It definitely wasn't.
So looking back now at that, when I hear somebody who is struggling with substances and they say like, oh, I'm going to try moderating, and this is just my own experience. Like, this is how my journey went. Like, there was no moderating for me. In fact, looking back now, if I had ever said that I was going to moderate, that would be silly. Like, that just wasn't for me. But when you look back on that period in your life now, are you like thinking like maybe it could have worked if I would have done this or that? Or are you like, no, that was silly, I'm glad I quit trying to do that?
You mean like the moderating thing?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like I needed to fail. I needed to fail a bunch of times, and I
Mm-hmm.
needed to struggle. I think I needed that struggle. And, I'm at a point now. I don't want to fast forward too far here, but I'm definitely at a point now where I'm looking at all these mistakes, these embarrassing things that I've done, all these times I've let people close to me down, myself. One thing I actually did mention was I met my wife, right? I'm married now.
Mm-hmm.
I met, and, we've been married since 2016. I met her in 2011 when I was in that kind of coke zone time frame. And she never did coke, never did drugs. And I hid a lot from her. So she didn't really know to the extent it was. So, like this whole, moderating thing, it's just, I was just trying. I was really trying to be better. That's what I was doing. I was trying to be better,
Mm-hmm.
and it just wasn't working. It
Mm-hmm.
wasn't working. So it wasn't until 2016, around the holidays, that I had another really bad episode, and I woke up just feeling like so bad about myself,
Mm-hmm.
ashamed, and you name it. I just felt really, really bad. And that's when I just woke up, and I was like, I feel so bad that I need to try something different. So I just went on Google. I think it was December 27th. And I just went on Google, and I was like, therapist in Toronto. Like, I was so desperate to talk to somebody, another therapist, someone else. And I was so lucky that I was able to find someone in Toronto, very close to my place, that I actually saw within, I think it was like 2 hours of making that first contact the same day. Like, what are the chances around the holidays? I'm surprised he was even working. So I go there, we sit down, and we get right into it. And within about 20 minutes of talking, he just looked at me like no one had ever looked at me before. Like, no one, not a family member, not my girlfriend, not best friends, not my parents, nobody, and said, "Luke, you can never be drinking again." And he just like stopped and paused, and I was like, "What do you mean? What do you mean?" I just couldn't wrap my head around. I was actually debating him in the moment. I was debating him,
Did
even
you
though I
just
had
say
failed
that?
all these times. Sorry?
Like, were you debating? Like, did you really just say that out loud? Like, is that what
No,
you were
I was
thinking?
like, no, I was like, yeah, it's like, there's no way.
Uh-huh.
Even then, I was so desperate. I felt so bad. I reached out, like I said, like in desperation, got him. He's giving me like the goods, and I was still like, no, that's not what I wanted to hear. No.
Mm-hmm.
So I was debating him. I didn't, I couldn't accept it. I just couldn't wrap my head around it.
Mm-hmm.
But then when the meeting finished, I went back to my car, and I literally sat in the parking lot, and I just could not stop crying by myself. I couldn't stop crying.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just so emotional. And I knew then, like, just kind of that I've had time to process it a little bit. I sat there and I was like, there's something there. There's something there. And I was like, just be open to this, Luke. Like, come on. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what do you have to lose? So I went back to see him a little bit later, a few days later, I think.
Did
And
you stay
that's when
sober?
he's like, yes. And then I went back and he's like, Luke, okay, great. But I really want you to do group therapy.
Mm-hmm.
So he had put me into group therapy at CAMH, Center of Addiction and Mental Health. And that's when that's when the journey started for me.
So let's have a look at, you know what, before we look at these comments, I have a question for you. When you walked out of that meeting with that therapist to your car, sitting there crying, did it feel like he threw a weight onto you or that he took one off?
I think at first it felt a weight on me
Mm-hmm.
because, like I said, I was just I couldn't accept it. I was like debating him still. I didn't want to believe it. But then once I processed it and I kind of took a breather and just kind of thought about it, I was like, I felt like he took a load off. Like it just felt like there was now a path. There was now something for me to look at, another option for me to look at
A
that I had
solution.
never even thought, another solution, because I never even thought about that. How crazy as that sounds. I never thought sobriety was ever an option.
Mm-hmm.
Like, no way.
Not
I
even on
always
the
thought,
radar.
okay, I'm going to work on this. I'm going to work on my drinking. I'm going to stop at 2 beers. I'm going to stop at 3 bears. That's what I said. That's how I would always be like, no, you're going to stop. You're going to slow down. Or you're not going to drink as much. But like, it's like not drinking was just like never an option in my mind. But until he said it like that, and you know, like I said, I had failed a lot in my life. I had screwed up enough to be like, okay, I'm ready. I was ready to hear. If I had that conversation with him a year before, 2 years before, I probably would have laughed at him, and I probably never would have gone to see him again, and I just would have probably carried on with how I was doing things. But it was something about, like, you know, the point of my life that I was actually ready to hear it.
Let's look at some comments.
Okay, Jeremy Colvin says, or asks, excuse me, were you only doing coke and drinking, or did you do other things when you went down that path? Don't need to answer if that's too much.
It's not too much.
This is Hard Knocks Talks.
This is not too much. You know, it was mostly cocaine, but then I'd be at like these after hours where I would just be on so much stuff. I didn't even know what I was on, honestly. You know, it was MDMA, of course, cocaine, and then I think it was like K. I honestly, I was just so like I want to just really like let loose, and I was in that mood. So it was a bunch of other stuff, I'm sure, but I never did needles, never did any of that stuff, never. And actually, the times I did like K was been very a couple times. It was mostly like MDMA and coke. That's what it was, and of course, you know, drinking.
And Peter Mahana says, Hard Knocks Talks. I love this more and more. Thanks for everything you guys and women do for all of us. Thank you, Peter. And Twinkle would like to say, moderating wouldn't have worked for me. It was all or nothing. I'm on the same page as you, girl.
I can relate to that. Although, like, I do know some people, there are like people out there do exist that like really they burnt their lives down with certain substances, and then, you know, now they can go for a drink on Friday night, and it blows my mind. I don't understand how that can happen, but there are people like that exist.
And Cindy Doolin, realistically, I should have died with the amount of drugs that I was using and mixing. I didn't know it then, but now know that my testimony is how I get to help people see hope. Beautiful.
So, Luke, there's the dog. Told you he might chime in. Hey, knock it off. So, you mentioned that it was the way that the therapist said this to you, so like you can't do this anymore. You were in a relationship at this time, correct?
I was, yes.
So
Yeah.
when you were talking about trying so desperately to moderate, saying like, "Oh, I'm only going to have two tonight," or "I'm only going to do this or that," was your partner aware of the struggle you were having? Like, did you share the struggle with her and say, "I'm only going to do this," or "I'm only going to do that," or was this something you kept to yourself?
I definitely was very open with her, like, in the sense that she knew that like, we'd fight a lot when I was drinking. Like, if I think about our arguments, it was mostly surrounded around my drinking
Mm,
and my drug use. And actually the drug use I hid from her, actually. I just
mm,
because I didn't like whenever I would use it, it was never in front of her, never, like, I would always hide it from her.
mm,
And she wasn't stupid. She knew that I was on drugs, I'm sure. Like, how
mm,
can you not? And she like, she never gave me an ultimatum. Like, she didn't. She was gonna leave me, no question. But she was never like, "Look, if you don't stop, I'm gonna leave you." Like, she didn't really talk to me like that. She was very supportive of me.
mm,
She loved me very much, as I did her. But yeah, it's like my bad episode nights would be, where I would take off for, a couple days, and she would get, really worried about me. She called my brother, stuff like that. That was near the end. That was just
mm,
before I had that meeting.
mm,
But up until then, it was a lot of me just, kind of just, being difficult,
mm,
being a hardhead, being, a typical Italian, ego. I had an ego, and I was like, no, it's not that bad. Like I said, I can keep my job. I have a great job.
mm,
I'm supporting us in this place. Took a lot of pride in my work. I was
mm,
like, I'm paying the bills. Like, leave me alone. Like,
mm.
kind of attitude, right? And
Yep.
that's I've come a long way from that. That type
Mm.
of person. I've come a long way from that type of person.
So what did your family say? You mentioned that, drinking was very commonplace in your family.
Yeah.
So when you quit drinking, what did your loved ones say? Were they like surprised? Were they happy for you? Were they supportive or not so much?
They were a bit surprised because I hid it. Like, they had no idea I was struggling with drugs. Like,
Mm-hmm.
no idea. Because, like, I wasn't living at home. When I would go see them, I wouldn't use. I never used around them, never at the house. So they had no reason to suspect that I was struggling. Like, I from the outside, I look like, I was in good shape. I went to the gym a lot, played a lot of sports, had a lot of friends. I didn't look like I was struggling. So they had no idea. So when I said that I was actually tr- working on myself and not drinking, they were surprised. And my mom was surprised. My dad had passed away just before I got sober.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I to about 2 years before I got sober.
Mm,
And he was a big reason why I really, again, took this more seriously at the end. It was because I knew my dad, being he was an amazing man, amazing father, but he struggled a lot with alcohol. Like, he struggled a lot. My mom and him argued a lot when I was a kid, and I cried a lot, and the oldest of two, and I don't know, I cried a lot. So that was always in the back of my head. And
mm,
I definitely think today he'd be so proud of me. I really do feel that, and it gives me a lot of joy thinking about that. But yeah, like, my mom, she was a bit surprised. My aunts and uncles, they were just kind of like, why? Like, they were like, why was the big question? Like, why? Like, why are you like, why? And
Why
I
are you
and I was
quitting
so
or why
embarrassed.
did you use drugs?
No, why are you quitting?
Right.
Why are you quitting?
Mm,
They had no idea about the drugs.
mm,
And I was just like, I'm trying to be better. And I was so scared to tell them about the drugs. There's something about drugs that has an even worse stigma than alcohol, in my opinion.
mm-hmm,
Is you say drugs and people look at you like you're crazy.
mm-hmm,
So it's just another level. So I didn't share that. And so I just kind of said, yeah, my drinking. I mean, they saw me at weddings where I was, on the dance floor, ripping my pants ripped. And I was just like, my mom would say, hanging off the chandeliers. Like, I like to just, like I said, be like the center of attention and like do loud things. So she could see a little bit that I was, obviously struggling a little bit, clearly. But I kept it away from her, from the drugs. And then I felt so free and liberated the moment I told my parents and I told my mom that I struggled with cocaine and drugs. Like, I felt that I didn't have, like, you don't have to tell your parents anything. I didn't have to tell them anything, but there was a part of me that wanted to. And when I did tell them that I was struggling with drugs and all that, I just felt so like free and liberated. And I just felt so incredibly relieved. I felt so relieved. And once I told them that, I was like, wow, okay, there's no more secrets now. There's no more secrets. And I can just be, and I can just, be and continue working on myself. And it just felt so amazing to be able to do that.
Mm-hmm. So tell us about your, like you mentioned before, that you spent your first 5 years sort of in the closet with your sobriety. Tell us about those first 5 years. Like, how did you work on yourself in a way that was private like that without really telling anybody? Like, what did that look like?
Yeah. So that's where it's like, I didn't do it right. Like, those 5 years were really tough years for me. They were really, really hard because I stopped group. I didn't do any group therapy. I did 2 sessions at CAMH. I did 2 therapy sessions, saw what I needed to see with an advanced group, saw what I needed to see, felt that I could do it on my own. And that's definitely not something I would ever recommend anyone do, because I struggled a lot by myself. I was ashamed of my sobriety. I never talked about it. I hid it from everyone, colleagues, friends of friends. They didn't know I was sober, or if they did, it was by accident. A close friend might've said something. Like, I never talked about it, because I looked at it like, I'm sober because I'm weak. Like, I'm weak. Like, Luke, there's something wrong with you. Sober people, there's something wrong with them. That's how I thought. And I was sober. So much of my identity was around my drinking lifestyle. Right. And I tried to like, I tried to like almost like maintain that lifestyle without drinking, if that makes sense. Like, I would still try to like fit in and try to do all these things. And it was just hard. I was like fooling myself. I wasn't being authentic. I wasn't being authentic to who I was. Cause like I talked a little bit about the character I had developed, right? Where like people just kind of like expected me. Oh, Luke, he's loud and he says inappropriate things and he talks loud and he that's how he is. So I always thought I had to be like that. And when you're trying to be someone you're not, it's tiring. It's so friggin' tiring. So I did that for I did that for 5 years. Okay. My wife was incredibly supportive, my biggest champion, so proud of me. So she helped me a lot. And again, I never drank by myself. I never drank alone. I never drank, without, like, I was a social drinker. I would drink at parties, and that was my trigger. So she worked with me to be like a decoy a lot. Like, she would help me at parties and help me in social situations. Like, I'd have something, in my hand, or I would just lie while I'm not drinking. So I hid it for a long time. And I still carried a lot of shame and guilt. Like, I wasn't a super positive, upbeat kind of person that I think I am today, in my sobriety. And that's like part of the reason why I'm so vocal now. And it's like, I'm so excited to be here with you both tonight, and just, how I am with my, my message. And now I'm doing like sober coaching, recovery coaching, life coaching. It's because I want to help people. I want to show that you don't need to be 5 years, or you don't need to be X amount of years or days sober to start making some changes, like some like mental changes, mindset changes about yourself, identity change. You don't need to wait a certain amount of time for that to happen. You can do that right away. And it wasn't until I hit, an anniversary. I hit my 5-year anniversary that I actually took a second to actually be like, shit, Luke, like be proud of yourself for a second. Like be proud. And I just was like, look, like that's really, really cool. Like be proud of yourself. You worked so hard at this. It's been 5 years. And I was like, okay, I think I'm now ready to like let people know that I'm sober and like maybe share my story a little bit and like just again part of that, part of that empowerment that I thought, that vulnerability that I felt by just being open and sharing.
Mm-hmm.
I thought about it, and I couldn't think of any other way to do it, like to share my story, than by being as transparent as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And up until that point, all my social media, everything was private. I was a very private, kind of person. And I was like, how am I gonna do this? Like, I'm ready. I think I want to talk to, like, let people know. How am I gonna do it? And I couldn't think of another scarier way to do it than by doing it on LinkedIn, because I worked at a big corporate global technology company.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I think I want to let the entire office and all the people I know, I want them to know, not just like my 200 friends on Instagram, my private account. I not just my close friends or my close, I want my colleagues. I want, acquaintances to know what I've been through. And I want to share, maybe someone can relate to what I've been through, and maybe it'll offer some sort of hope for them. So that's what I did. I created this public post on it on LinkedIn. Scared shitless. I went back and forth on this thing for like weeks. Finally posted it, and it was just, again, I felt so free. I just felt so free. It was out there. Love it or hate it, I was like, it's out there. And that was such a pivotal moment for me, because I started feeling proud and happy. And I was like, look, this is a good thing, that what you're doing. It's not a weakness. And that's when like things really, really took a turn for the positive for me. I kind of like found myself in that moment, how empowering it was to just be so open and vulnerable and sharing that it provided so much growth. And that was in 2021 that I did that.
Mm-hmm.
And what a big moment for me to do that. And I just found so much confidence within myself. And that's when I started like really honing in on the work and all of that.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned before, you said it's really hard trying to be something that you're not. And I know on my own personal journey, and it took me some time to realize, because like I too felt that way, like, who am I without these substances? Who am I without this lifestyle? I came to realize that I had spent my whole life, like my whole adult and teenage life, trying to be something that I wasn't, with the substances, with the alcohol, with the bars and the nightclubs and all of the things that come along with it. Have you come to realize that too, or is you something different for you?
Yeah, I had like, absolutely. I didn't know how to act, how to be. I felt awkward at a lot of situations. I really felt awkward. I didn't know who I was. Honestly, I felt a little lost.
Mm-hmm.
I felt very lost. I still took a lot of pride in my work, so that kind of made me feel good.
Mm-hmm.
And I always had this vision or this goal to, like, be a parent, and not be a parent who's not struggling with drugs and alcohol. That's for sure, especially not drugs. And I had this like vision of this goal to like be a really good father one day. And that became like a big why for me. Like, why am I really pushing myself to do that? So that I kept that close, and that helped me a lot in those hard situations. But then
Mm-hmm.
something else that I did, around 2.5 years of being sober, I found another hobby. I found something else to kind of help me with my routine, help me find purpose. Gave me a lot of joy. and
Mm-hmm.
and and that was running. That was like running, long distance running. And up until that point, I hated running. Like before I was introduced to it in recovery, like I hated running. I
Mm-hmm.
always played sports. I always, team sports growing up, loved going. I went to the gym a lot, even when I was struggling with drugs and alcohol. Like during the week, I was clean, and I'd work out a lot. So I was in the gym like five days a week at least. And so, anyways, I found this other thing that became like an outlet for me,
Mm-hmm.
and it was so much more about what it did for my mind than anything else. And it's been a lot of fun now that I found running. I just feel like it's helped me. It's my therapy. Truly, running has become my therapy.
Well, and you've run marathons. Tell us about the first marathon you ran.
Yeah, so I ran my first ever race in 2019. So I got sober in December 31st, 2016.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just say January 1st, 2017. So on 2019, in May, on Mother's Day, I did a 10K race. First time I wore a race bib, like a bib for a race, first ever race. And I did 10K, and I just fell in love with the crowds and the cheering and so much positivity that was there. And
Mm-hmm.
my best friend, he was an endurance athlete as well, and he was like, "Look, like, good for you. You should do a half marathon." I was like, "Whoa, a half's
Mm-hmm.
like double the distance. It's 21 kilometers. I just did 10. Like, how am I going to do double?" And he's like, "Yeah, no, you can do it." So in October of that year, so I did the 10K in May. In October of the same year, I did a half marathon. And I was like, wow, this was really cool. I trained for it. I found a plan online. And then that's 2019 October, and then COVID happened, 2020, right? Shortly after that, COVID happened, and I was like, okay, COVID happened, races are being canceled, everything's kind of like stopping, and I was like, this, I'm actually gonna do the opposite here. I'm gonna double down. I'm gonna double down on my running and my training, and I got a coach. I got a running coach, a virtual running coach that helped me with my plans. And I just really enjoyed running because I love what it did for my mind. So I started running and training and taking it seriously and having like a professional helping me with like my plan and my paces. I never met him. He was all virtual, but he
Mm-hmm.
helped me. And then I ran my first marathon in 2021, and I had this goal, this goal to qualify for the Boston Marathon. And I did it on my first marathon. I worked my ass off. I worked my ass off. I've been running a lot, and I just really enjoyed it. And then it's just like created so much life for me, so much purpose. And my sobriety and my running, they go hand in hand. Like they complement each other. They really, really do. It keeps me sober. It keeps me positive. It keeps me so many things. So like I would not be who I am without my running and my sobriety today. Like there's no way.
Do you ever get anyone saying things like, "Oh, this is your new addiction," or "You're taking it too far," or things like that? Do you ever get that?
You know what? But I'm so happy you mentioned that. I have gotten that, and I feel like maybe some people are not saying it, but that's what they're thinking.
Mm-hmm.
But Rich Roll, okay? Do you know who Rich Roll is?
I do. Yeah,
He's got a huge podcast.
he does.
He's in
Yeah.
recovery. He's
Mm-hmm.
a legend, right? He's got I got a bunch of his books. Oh, I got his I'm reading a bunch of his stuff, and he's just really fascinating. And he actually talks about this. He's like, people say to me that you switch your addiction from running to from alcohol and drugs to running. And the way he says it, it gives me chills. He's like, alcohol and drug, that's the easy choice. That's easy. Running is hard. Showing up for yourself is hard. And he goes like, you know, like running puts you smack in the middle of reality. Like you're in reality. You're in pain. You're in reality. You're dealing with the uncomfortable head on. Alcohol and drugs kind of puts you in another world. You're not in reality. So
Mm-hmm.
he goes on. And he says a bunch of other things. I wish I had the quote, but it resonates so much with me. It's like, yes, I understand how people may think that's like, okay, I really was all in on drinking and partying, and now I'm all in on running and healthy lifestyle. I understand the kind of correlation, but running's a hard choice Okay. To show up for a run, to show up and when you don't feel like it, which is probably like 50% of the time I'm putting my shoes on, I actually don't want to run at all. Like that's hard. And, yeah, I mean, being sucked into this drugs and all, you feel like you don't have a choice. I get that. That can be hard too, but I don't look at it like that. I don't look at it like I filtered or I redirected my addiction. I don't look at it like that. It doesn't feel good for me to say that. I don't. Yeah. And I just have so much fun with it. There's so many amazing people I've met in the running community. It's like the sober community. Some of the best people on this planet are sober people because there's no judgment. You meet a sober person, they're not judging you. They're rooting for you. They're cheering you on. And I love that about the community. Same with the running community. It's so supportive, so positive, upbeat. Some of the best. Like I really get a lot of all the feelings from the communities and like sober athletes. Man, we're a unique breed. And I just love it. I just love it.
Yeah, no, you direct that desire to feel better that we all have in the right direction. I mean, everybody wants to feel better. That's not a defect of character, Yeah. So, but we can go to great lengths to feel better, and my addiction taught me that. Like if I want something bad enough, I will get it, and nothing will stop me. And when I put that addiction down, when I put down that toxic relationships with substances, and I pointed that desire to feel better in a positive direction, well, here we are.
Yeah.
So you mentioned sober community. You go to meetings?
So what I did was I was hosting a bunch of meetings, and I was hosting free meetings for about 6 months. I was hosting meetings for men only. All on my Instagram account. Like I'm not very active on Facebook, but my Instagram account, I just started sharing, hey, I'm going to start doing meetings. And I just put it to my stories.
Or like just gatherings?
No. Just a support group for men. I never did AA. Did AA. I'm nothing against AA. For me, I don't know. I didn't go down that route, and I have nothing against it. But just for me, I didn't. But I wanted to just create like a safe place for men to share and to connect and to just be open. And I love that it was just for men, because I find that there's a huge stigma for men, and there's like so much ego men have. And it's just like nice to feel safe, just men. So I did that for 6 months, once a week, every Wednesday for an hour and a half. We did that. And I was like, Luke, I am really feeling fulfilled by doing these meetings. And leading these meetings, and it gave me so much fulfillment. I was like, you know what? I think this is something I want to do. This is something I want to do. Like, and that's what I'm doing now. Like I got my recovery coaching certification out of BC. I just finished, I just finished a course there to do that. And I'm just kind of getting my hours in. And it's this whole other life that I've kind of created for myself now. And I just feel so much fulfillment, so much joy in doing what I'm doing, and helping people who are working on, finding themselves and finding their greater purpose. Cause like this journey is so much more. And I know you'll agree, than just like not drinking and not using, right? That's like step one.
That's the easy part.
You're right.
It was. And like, it might be hard for some people to hear that, but truthfully, putting down the drugs and alcohol was the easiest part of my journey into recovery. Like it's going to suck for a while.
I couldn't agree more. It's going to suck. Absolutely. Cause you're going to deal with that uncomfortableness. You're going to deal with that awkward uncomfortableness, that really shitty, like you're just going to face stuff head on. You're not going to be escaping anymore. But it's so much more, like you said, than just not using. It's like finding things within yourself, and mindset growth and personal development, self-discovery, self-actualization. There are so many layers to this thing that's what I'm just so excited about. I'm working with clients now, and I just love to know that I'm kind of on their journey with them. I'm their champion. I'm pushing them to think a bit differently, and I'm there to support them. And it's been a very rewarding thing, I'll say. very rewarding. It's also very scary
Mm-hmm.
in the sense that I had this, I had a big corporate job for 13 years, same company, big job, benefits, you name it. And then I got laid off in September of 2022, massive layoffs in the tech industry, tech sales. And I was like, blindsided, just totally blindsided. And I was like, what am I going to do? And I started applying for all these other jobs, big companies, and so many companies are on hiring freezes. And I
Mm-hmm.
must have sent my resume, I don't know, to 50 different companies. And
Crickets.
it's just like, it just crickets. And I was like, Luke, you can't feel sorry for yourself, because it's easy to feel sorry for yourself, eh? You're
Mm-hmm.
like,
Oh yeah.
I even found that
It's almost comforting to feel sorry for yourself, because I
it
did it.
is
I did it for so long, this is like, oh, I'm home,
exactly. And then I had some friends, at work who got let go too in the industry, and we were like, talking. We were all feeling really down,
Mm-hmm.
and that's like where I was like, you know what, Luke, for the first time in your life, you're gonna go for something and not take the safe route.
What a
Like
gift.
my whole life, I took the safe route, and I'm just like, speaking with you today, my palms were a little sweaty when I started, and I find that I'm putting myself out there more and more. And this coaching thing, the first time I did a group meeting with men, I was scared. I was terrified. I got a bit more comfortable the second time. Then I got more, and it's like, now it's like, that's where I've grown so much, is because I put myself in uncomfortable situations, and that's where that's where the magic happens.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that, I feel like it's the universe is trying to tell me something here. And I'm incredibly passionate about this stuff. I love it. I really get a lot of joy out of this thing. And I know the impact that this stuff has on people, right, Dan? Like, we were talking a bit before the air, like,
Mm-hmm.
to think of, the person you are today, right?
Mm-hmm.
What you're doing now for the community, you're giving back, you're giving people like me a chance to share, you're giving your viewers a chance to listen, to not feel alone, to connect.
Mm-hmm.
It's an amazing, incredibly powerful thing that
Mm-hmm.
you're doing. And I just have so much respect for you and Donna, what you guys are doing. So, thank you so much. And thank you. Big time.
You're very welcome, and thank you for coming, but we're not going to let you go quite yet. We do have a couple of more comments here. One of them's kind of a long one, but I think there's a good talking point in there that we should touch on before we turn you loose. So let's get it up here.
Okay, so the comment comes in from Lindsay Amato, and thank you very much for the comment, Lindsay. She says, I used to think I couldn't be accepted if I didn't drink. Coming from a small community ridden with intergenerational trauma, wearing masks to portray someone we aren't is totally normalized. Learning how to be sober and accept my sober self was so incredibly hard, but also being accepted by the same people who didn't know the sober me was so life-changing. My entire life and social life changed.
Do you have anything you want to touch on there, Luke? I know that there's some interesting points around an evolving social life. Was it easy for you to walk away from that lifestyle as far as like the friends? Like, did you miss any of the friends, or did you quickly find that they weren't really your friends anyways? Or what did that look like?
Yeah. So I lost a lot of my drug friends because those friends were not really my core group, people I grew up with, people that I was close to. Those people just naturally, we grew apart, right? I stopped going to the places they were going. I just stopped seeing them and all of that. But my close circle, I mean, look, I'm very lucky that a lot of my close circle are more or less people I grew up with. So I've known them for a long time. And I consider my close group like really close, in that they've been super supportive for me. Kind of like they, now that I've been sharing more and they see me more, like acknowledging what I'm going through, they're very supportive of me. They're always making me feel comfortable. I feel like they're asking questions, not like they're asking questions to understand, like they're listening to understand where I'm coming from. And I need but I've gotten that from like my close group, and that's made me feel safe. But I'm sure there's a big, there's a lot of people out there that I maybe have, I don't know, maybe rubbed the wrong way, or just, I just stopped focusing. Honestly, if I could just simplify, I just stopped focusing on, or I'm trying to, it's a lot easier said than done, I know, but just like stop worrying about what I call the noise. Like all those people around, like the friends of friends, like all those, that's noise. Like your core group is the most important. And if you have support there, you have love there, and that core group could be like one person. It doesn't have to be like an art, like 10, 15, 20. It doesn't have to be that. But you have one person. I have that in my wife and some close friends. And that's what I care about. Like I'm not trying to make anybody like me at all, right? I have a beautiful wife. I have a beautiful daughter. You know, my life now is centered around her and all the activities we do with her, and it's like it brings me so much joy. So when I go to social events, I have a wedding coming up next weekend, a big wedding, high school buddy, all high school, like a big crew of these. I'm just like, look, yeah, do I have a bit of anxiety? Do I start overthinking about that? I mean, sure, naturally, yes, of course. But I'm gonna leave early, right? I'm gonna leave when I start feeling not comfortable. I'm gonna have my alcohol-free drinks. My buddy was so cool that he's like, "Hey, Luke, what's your favorite alcohol-free?" And he ordered a bunch of it, so we're gonna have it at the wedding. They're gonna serve it at the wedding. Like, how cool is that? He reached out. I mean, I know it's not just for me, but it's like people who are pregnant. Like, he wants to have other options, and I thought, man, that's so cool. So I'm just gonna be myself, and just really not worry about that. And I just find that I like to think that I'm definitely happy. Like I don't know if you can feel it. I'm a happy person. I've been through a lot, but I'm happy. So I find that when I'm just kind of like in a good place and I'm happy and I'm smiling with people, that I kind of get it back. And if I'm not getting it back, I'm not so worried. Like I just spend less time worrying about how other people think about me and just be. Yeah. And it feels pretty good.
Awesome. Okay, we got one last question, and then we will put a cap on it.
Okay, question comes in from Teresa Ross. Thanks for your question. Do you have any suggestions for those of us who love someone in addiction/recovery on how best to support them?
That's a great question. I should probably put you in touch with my wife. She'd be a little bit better to ask that question or answer that than me. I think, look, people need to want to get better for themselves. Like if you're kind of maybe like, I don't know, giving them a hard time or giving them ultimatums, it's not gonna stick. It's not. He needs to, or she needs to, find it within themselves, and that's the hard part. Like that's the really hard part. You can't like teach someone that. They have to. Unfortunately, most people need to like fail for themselves. Like I needed to like screw up a bunch of times. A lot of people, like I'm so grateful that I was able to get back on track when I did, because I didn't hit that rock bottom that you hear a lot of people talking about, right? Like those people who lost jobs, were in the hospital, like, and they bounced back. Like I'm so proud of those people. That's incredible resilience and strength, like so much respect. But my story, like I never hit that. I mean, yeah, I definitely put myself in really bad situations. I did a lot of shameful things and a lot of regret, but like, I didn't do that. So I don't know how you support someone. You just kind of, you just say it again. Sorry.
Yeah, well, there's a comment here. Hang on. Cindy said, I would say that to that question, find a group for yourself and learn how to support them. So
there you go. That's great advice, actually.
I've been to some Al-Anon meetings in my day. Find that peer support. You deserve to be happy too, right? Oh,
there's also there's also Moms Stop the Harm. They have the Holding Hope, which is peer support groups for people of loved ones who are still suffering harm.
So there's options, certainly options.
Yeah, that's great advice. That's really good advice. I like that. Yeah, it's hard. I can imagine it's not easy to see someone you love struggling. You just kind of got to be there for them, and just try to support them as best you can, and hopefully they see the light. Like just get them maybe to listen to other people's stories. Maybe they can relate to some, and it'll maybe give them a bit of inspiration, or maybe like, hey, you know what? Maybe I should make some changes, or think about making some changes, because it's going to do a lot of good.
Yeah. Actually, if anyone's listening right now and they want to learn more about Moms Stop the Harm and their Stronger Together Canada peer support groups, you can find information on that on our, they're one of our sponsors. On our sponsors list, you can find contact information there. A lot of resources there. Luke, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Is there anything that you would like to leave us with? Where can we find you?
Yeah, so I'm all in on this journey with recovery coaching. So all your viewers, I put together a guide on how to be the life of the party sober. I'm probably gonna have to reread it before the wedding, but just how to be the life of the party sober. And I put together a bunch of tips. Probably spent way too much time doing it. So if you'd like to get your free copy, go to my website. It's marathon2, like the number two, numerical 2, sobriety.ca. marathon2sobriety.ca. If you sign up for my mailing list, it'll get emailed to you right away. And it's like a 14-page document. And so you could do that. And then I'm more active on Instagram, a lot more active on Instagram than I am Facebook. My Facebook account's private. I created a page like not long ago. I don't have many followers, but like I'm sharing all my story on Instagram. So if you'd like to connect with me a little bit more, I invite you to do it on Instagram, and that's marathon2sobriety.
Awesome.
All one word.
Right on, Luke. Well, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Thank you for sharing your journey with us and what you learned along the way. We very much appreciate that, you taking the time to share with our community. And we will let you go, my man. Take care for now.
Awesome.
All right.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yep. All right. If you're getting something out of what we're doing here, you can find all our audios on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts, or live and interactive, right here on Facebook or YouTube. Thanks for watching, everybody. Take care.
Say, this is Hard Knocks Talks.